I'm Spider-Man.
Spider-Man ruled 2021, and No Way Home came out in December. It's already grossed over $1 billion at the box office, and it's just become one of the biggest Marvel movies ever, and it's still growing as it's still in the theaters to this day. And with the 8th movie coming out, I figure why not rank all 8 movies from worst to best? I know you're thinking, isn't there technically 9 because of Into the Spider-Verse? The answer is yes, but here's the thing. I haven't seen it, and really, should I even count it as a Spider-Man movie with the others? Because I'm pretty sure it doesn't have anything to do with that universe, but it very well could. So I'm just letting you know now, when you don't see Into the Spider-Verse on this list, it's because I've never seen it, and I don't know if it's canon with the, live-action movies at all. At least that's just my guess in this case. Even though it messes with the multiverse, I'm not sure what kind of story they go with there. But, yeah, basically we're going to take a look at the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi trilogy. We're going to take a look at the 2 Andrew Garfield movies, and the recent Home trilogy, as they're calling it, with Tom Holland. Rank those movies from worst to best, in my opinion. Keep in mind, because I know there's going to be a controversial decision that people may talk about in this video, but basically the way I'm ranking them is from just enjoyment overall. Which ones did I enjoy the least, and which ones did I enjoy the best? And I think at number 8, the worst one, most people would agree here. Now, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is only my worst because it's the one I remember the least about, other than Electro was one of the main villains along with the Hobgoblin, and Gwen Stacy dies. That's really all I remember from this movie, and apparently they were setting up something big. They were setting up The Amazing Spider-Man 3, where he was going to finally have the Venom serum, and they were going to set up this Amazing Spider-Man 4, where Tobey Maguire was actually going to come into the picture. So apparently Sony and Marvel had been planning on Tobey Maguire returning as Spider-Man again, but because The Amazing Spider-Man 2 did so bad, we never got that, and it's left being just not even a cult classic at this point. I mean, it has its defenders, but I think everybody can agree that out of the 8, this is the worst one, and it has nothing to do with Andrew Garfield. I loved Andrew Garfield's portrayal of Spider-Man, the more, sassy, kind of bratty teenager who's, got, like, this sarcastic attitude. Like, it was really fun. Like, he actually put some, fun into the character. It was just, the story overall was just kind of all over the place, and I had no clue what they were doing, and for the most part, the villains just weren't that interesting. They could have done better with that, and they actually did in No Way Home, bringing Jamie Foxx back as Electro and doing a better job with it. So The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I see what they were trying to do, but it just didn't work. Number 7, I don't know how many people feel about this, but we have Spider-Man 3, the final in the Sam Raimi trilogy, which was supposed to be 4 movies, but since the 3rd one kind of didn't do all that well in terms of reception, Sam Raimi dropped out of the project, and Sony was like, alright, we'll just reboot Spider-Man then in a couple of years. This one has become more of a cult classic, and that's why I didn't put it as the worst, because again, there's defenders here, but more and more people over the years have really started to appreciate it for what it was. Sure, there's the Bully Maguire when he's got the Venom serum and he's, saying these cheesy lines, or that whole dance scene around New York, which went from one of the worst scenes in cinema history, at least superhero-wise, to one of the best, one of the most memed ever. I think for a trilogy, or the final movie of a trilogy, it tried to do too much. Sam Raimi said he didn't want to involve Venom because he didn't know much about the character, and you can definitely tell. It didn't feel right, and the fact, too, that you got freaking Topher Grace, Eric Foreman to play Venom, like, that just seemed like the worst possible choice, and I don't know, it should have ended on a higher note than this. Like, if they would have let Sam Raimi do the Vulture and the Mysterio thing like he wanted to do, it probably could have been really good and a fantastic conclusion to a good trilogy, but instead we get Spider-Man 3, which didn't necessarily flop in the box office. It's just the reception just kind of, ruined the trilogy in itself. Here's where the controversy might start, because I already know what you're saying. How you have The Amazing Spider-Man ranked ahead of this? Well, number 6 is Spider-Man Homecoming, the first in the Tom Holland trilogy, the Home trilogy in 2017. around this time, we didn't really see Tom Holland much as Spider-Man. As a matter of fact, I think really the only time we had seen him as Spider-Man was in 2015 when he made his little appearance in Captain America Civil War. He wasn't like a main character. He showed up when, you know, the sides were fighting, and of course Tony Stark called him in. He took Captain America's shield, you know, all this, that, and the other. So it was very intriguing to see what a full Spider-Man solo movie was going to be like with him. How would the reception to him be? And it was pretty good for the most part. It's not that I hate this movie, it's just, you know, I remember seeing it and being like, okay, it's cool. Like, that's all it really was to me. I wasn't, like, blown away by it. I wasn't disappointed in it. It was just kind of like, okay, yeah, this is a Spider-Man movie. I did like Michael Keaton as Vulture, and I did like that you saw Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man in it. Granted, that's kind of the whole setup because this takes place during the time Captain America Civil War was happening, and Tony Stark was still kind of, I guess you can say, training Tom Holland's Spider-Man to see if he was worthy of being in the Avengers. Like, he was putting him up to these tasks and seeing if he would listen when he says, don't do this. He kept getting himself in antics, and he ended up defeating the Vulture in the end. Now, granted, I don't know why they ended up leaving off on the cliffhanger where the Vulture's in prison, and then he escapes prison and says he'll be back because, well, throughout the rest of the trilogy, we never see him again. I don't know if they plan on doing something past that, because now Michael Keaton has returned as Batman, and usually when you're signed with DC or Marvel, you can't sign with the other one. It's like a rule that is just there that you just don't do. It's more of a respect thing. So I don't know if they plan on bringing Vulture back, but it's definitely open since he never passed away. But yeah, it was definitely like one where I was just like, yeah, you know, it's cool, but hopefully throughout this trilogy it can get better, because I was just kind of like, you know, whatever. That's right, I have The Amazing Spider-Man ahead of Far From Home. Don't crucify me. When they rebooted the franchise for The Amazing Spider-Man and kind of took it in a different direction, like I feel like with Andrew Garfield's version of the superhero, his was more comic booky kind of. Like, it was violent, but it wasn't like super violent. Like the effects seemed more brighter than in Sam Raimi's version. It seemed interesting, and I like the fact too that it wasn't Peter and Mary Jane that was the love interest. It was Peter and Gwen Stacy, and here in my head I'm thinking, oh, Gwen Stacy, they're going to set up either Black Cat or Spider-Gwen. That never happened, but they have contacted Emma Stone, has Sony and Marvel, to do a solo Spider-Gwen movie, so that could be interesting. I don't know how they're going to do that since Gwen Stacy's dead, but, you know, Marvel will find a way to twist it and maybe use the multiverse somehow. That's just how they roll. But yeah, I remember, you know, going to the theater and being like, yeah, you know, I liked this a lot better than Spider-Man 3. It was easy to follow. Sure, maybe I didn't like that Lizard was the main bad guy in this movie, but I can understand. It's like we had already seen most of the main Spider-Man villains that you'd want to see other than, you know, maybe Mysterio and Vulture. So you don't want to make another movie with Green Goblin or Doc Ock or all this kind of stuff. You want to see some of his other villains newer on the big screen, and, you know, for what it was pretty cool. I wouldn't call it the best thing in the world, but it's definitely one that I would go back and watch, you know, if I just got bored one day. Like, I would choose to watch it. Again, not my first choice, but I can sit back, relax, and just watch Andrew Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man all day. Number 4 is Spider-Man Far From Home. You talk about making a sequel better than the first movie. Far From Home really blew me away more than Homecoming did, because it was one of those movies where the bad guy actually wins. It's kind of like Avengers Infinity War, how Thanos actually wins and then Endgame it finishes it all off, which is what Marvel has usually been doing nowadays. And with Far From Home, this is a movie where Mysterio, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, who, fun fact, during the filming of Seabiscuit in 2003, Tobey Maguire hurt his back so bad that they thought for Spider-Man 2 they were going to have to replace him with Jake Gyllenhaal. Now, that never happened, but it's just funny that Jake Gyllenhaal got to be in a Spider-Man movie years later down the line as a villain. But yeah, anyway, back on topic. Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio befriends Spider-Man, making him think he's kind of like on his side, he's going to help him, he's the good guy, and now that Tony Stark is dead, Spider-Man still has someone to look up to in Mysterio, but it turns out that's not the case. He ends up, you know, giving out Spider-Man's secret identity as Peter Parker, and framing him for murder. Basically, people now think that Spider-Man, Peter Parker, murdered Mysterio, because it's Spider-Man who's the real bad guy here, and it just really has that heartwarming story of how being a superhero, keeping your identity is definitely important, because if you lose your identity, then you put the ones you love in risk. And like I said, the fact that it just ended the way it did, setting you up for something, and you're just like, whoa, wait a minute, the bad guy won. Like, for most superhero movies, you're not expecting the bad guy to win, but here it was. Even though Mysterio is gone and dead, he came out victorious in this. It just made it so much more interesting, and I think Tom Holland's Spider-Man character arc really started to peak around this time as well. At number 3 is the new Spider-Man No Way Home. Look, I'm done saying spoilers when I mention Tobey and Andrew's name in the movie, because they're in the trailers now, they were at the red carpet premiere, and they get credited online when just about a couple weeks ago, before the movie came out, they weren't getting credit. So if you don't know that Tobey and Andrew are in the movie, then it's not my problem. I mean, their villains are in it, so if you put 2 and 2 together, it's kind of obvious. I'm not going to spoil when they come in to keep the anticipation up for you, but they're in the movie as expected, basically. But yes, No Way Home is the thrilling conclusion to the Home trilogy with Tom Holland, and it's really left the MCU wide open as to what the hell they're going to do next, because it seems like they've signed Andrew Garfield on for more movies, whether it's The Amazing Spider-Man 3, or I've heard Venom 3 could be the one where Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man ends up having to team up with Eddie Brock to fight Tom Holland's Spider-Man, who now has the Venom symbiote. As if you watch the post-credit scene for Spider-Man No Way Home, you'll see Eddie Brock in a bar, and he kind of just gets, portaled away into the MCU, whereas the symbiote was left behind, and you're not really sure. It's insinuated that it's Tom Holland's Spider-Man's universe, because Eddie Brock's mentioning the Avengers and the Hulk and all that kind of stuff, so yeah, but we don't really know where he gets teleported off to is the thing, and the symbiote's just kind of sitting there. So they've set up just this whole, cluster of what the hell's going to happen next, and to me that's interesting, because now I'm left on my seat like, wait a minute, is there going to be a new Spider-Man after Tom Holland? Is Tom Holland still going to play the character, or are Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield going to, continue doing this character for just a little bit more? Because I feel like with the redemption that this movie gave Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, he definitely deserves it. I mean, we see the arc, it's a couple years after Gwen Stacy died, you can see he's a bit more depressed and just down in the dumps, to a point where he's resorted to just killing every villain at this point, whereas he had the Batman code where he didn't want to kill people, but now he's just like, nope, I'm going to kill every single villain that, I come in contact with, whereas Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man had more of that fatherly figure leadership, where, he's been through some shit, yes, but he's able to, I guess, handle it better than the other two can, and he's just, a lot more mature in this case. And it'll be interesting to see if Tobey Maguire comes back, because, are we going to get Spider-Man 4, or what else? Because now that we know they exist in the MCU, I mean, you can do just a whole load of everything, and this movie, throughout its 2.5 hours, just seeing some of the characters from my childhood return, whether it be the Andrew Garfield movies or the Tobey Maguire movies, Willem Dafoe back as Green Goblin, Alfred Molina back as Doc Ock, the fact that it's all come full circle was what really did it for me, and the fact that it wasn't one of those half-assed, how do we get Tobey and Andrew in there? They actually planned it and did it well. It was something of the sort. That ending really gets me, and just seeing the 3 Spider-Men on screen together, getting ready to go into battle, swinging their way, it excited me the most, and this was the best Spider-Man I think I had seen since Spider-Man 2 back in 2004. So it's been a while since we've got a super fantastic Spider-Man movie, but this was it. Number 2 and number 1 can definitely be flipped, I feel, because the first 2 movies in the Raimi trilogy are classics. They're seen as 2 of the best superhero movies of all time, and maybe even 2 of the best Marvel movies of all time. I'm going with Spider-Man 1 at number 2. This movie revamped superhero franchises on the big screen, so much. At this time, we may have had, this was around the time when the X-Men, the first movie, had come out, and that did very well. And at this point is when Marvel started to take the lead over DC a little bit, as, after Batman and Robin kind of tanked, DC was just in shambles. They were making shows, but they weren't sure what to do movie-wise, and we really wouldn't get, another solid DC movie until Batman Begins in 2005. We did get Catwoman the year before, but that kind of didn't do anything. But with the Spider-Man movies, it really made people appreciate comic book movies again. Like, you can make a comic book movie serious, and you can kind of make it more adult-like in a way. Not that Sam Raimi's movies were adult-like, it was still, like, family-friendly. Like, you can sit down and watch it with your kids. The fact that he was able to mix them together so well, and even put a different kind of, like, tinge on Peter Parker, where usually when we think Peter Parker, he became Spider-Man like freshman year of high school, like 14, 15. But this Peter Parker is a senior in high school, and they go on this class field trip. This senior trip, he gets bit by this radioactive spider, and now all of a sudden he's got superpowers. And another thing I like with Tobey Maguire's over the other two is that his webs are organic. He doesn't have web shooters. He just goes whoop and they come out of his wrists, whereas Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland, they have the web shooters, so they can run out at any point in time, and they kind of, you know, poke fun at that in Spider-Man No Way Home when you do see it. It's really funny. I mean, this one just shows a more mature Spider-Man, Peter Parker I should say, where he's now gifted these powers and he's trying to figure out how to use them responsibly, hence the term with great power comes great responsibility. We see, you know, obviously his Uncle Ben die, and just the thing he has to go through there. He fights Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, and we also see the start of the Harry Osborn character arc with James Franco starting to turn into the Hobgoblin. Like, it's just, it was a very, very good movie for its time, and 20 years later, I think, still holds up to this day. But number one, you talk about sequels that are better than the original. Now, it's weird because of the three in the Sam Raimi trilogy, this is the one that grossed the least amount of money. I don't know why, but it did. That's Spider-Man 2. The one where we get Doc Ock introduced to us. Alfred Molina does a fantastic job there. And you're just wondering, where's Sam Raimi going to take it now? Peter's a college student, and he, you know, he's still trying to keep his secret identity from, well, at this point I think Mary Jane knew, but I don't think Aunt May knew, and obviously Harry Osborn didn't know, but later in the movie he would capture Spider-Man and actually find out that Peter is Spider-Man. He wanted to find out because he thinks that Spider-Man basically murdered his father, which I guess you can say he jumped out of the way of the glider and let it impale Green Goblin, but it kind of reminds me more of Batman Begins, where him and Ra's al Ghul are on the train, and he looks at Ra's and says, I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you, and he just gets the hell out of Dodge. Well, that's basically what I saw with Spider-Man. He was saving himself and goes, you know, I don't have to save him, he's pretty much a goner at this point, and just kind of let it happen. But yeah, I feel like this is where the character arcs for Peter Parker, for Harry Osborn definitely do their thing, and the way they kind of quickly get Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus, his character arc, is one of the better, like, stories, I think. Seeing this just normal, innocent scientist who was trying to make these mechanical arms and whatnot for good, and the chip ends up getting destroyed, and all of a sudden, oh my god, he's turned evil, and the arms control him. It's just, it's a story that you just... Again, 18 years later, this movie still holds up. It's very hard for superhero movies like this to hold up, but the effects are great. Everything about it is just fantastic. It's another one where the sequel is definitely better than the first movie, despite the first movie already being good in itself. Like, it's very hard to do, and Sam Raimi wanted to better himself in the second movie, and he definitely did that, coming up with an instant classic. So yeah, that is it for ranking the 8 live-action Spider-Man movies from worst to best. Again, I haven't seen Into the Spider-Verse. I bought it on DVD. I'm probably going to watch it because the second movie does come out this year. So if I'm going to go see that, then I'm going to need some leeway as to what the hell's going on there. So yeah, again, it's not on the list. My bad. I just obviously don't want to rank something that I haven't seen. It would definitely be unfair in this case. So you can tell me in the comments below, how would you rank these movies from worst to best? If you've seen Into the Spider-Verse, you can throw it in there, 9-1, 8-1, whatever you want to do. And of the 3 Spider-Man, I don't want you to tell me who was the best, but from Tobey, Andrew, and Tom, I want you to give me qualities about their characters that made it enjoyable, because I feel like with them, it's very hard to rank who was the worst Spider-Man and who was the best, because they all do it so well, and they all do it in different ways where it just makes it more interesting and whatnot and all that kind of stuff. So I was going to originally rank them from worst to best, but I just couldn't really do it. I really couldn't. And I want to see what you guys think in general. But other than that, stay safe out there, wear your mask, get vaccinated, and until then, I will catch you all in the next one.